It was often just a line item. And in my roles, I was just handed a number, like here's a number, and here's some broad categories of things where you can allocate this. And it wasn't necessarily done in a strategic kind of way. I never felt like there was enough conversation around what are we trying to accomplish with this number.
What would one new customer be worth if they replicate your ideal?
A lot of organizations in our ICP are not spending as much as they should to see the return that they want from their marketing investment, but it is much easier to get them to make that investment when you can demonstrate success.
It's tough to say no when you frame it in the way of a high probability opportunity.
At the end of the day, if it doesn't line up with what the company was trying to accomplish overall, how much does it matter? So it's really important for the marketing team to be able to be a part of the conversations around what is the business trying to accomplish in this year.
Hi, I'm Greg Linnemanstons, president of Whitert Group. On this episode of the Changeover Podcast, we're exploring how businesses, including industrial companies, can maximize marketing dollars with data-driven strategies that align with business goals. Joining me to share her insights, Stacy Bouchard. Well, thank you, Stacy, for joining me on this episode of the Changeover Podcast.
Sure.
What we're talking about today is marketing budgets and how managing those budgets has really changed. You and I can both, look back at the then of what we experienced 15 plus years ago, and how that's changed today. What did you experience back in your earlier days on how businesses looked at what they were doing with their marketing budgets?
Mm-hmm. It was often just a line item, and in my roles, I was just handed a number, like here's a number. And here's some broad categories of things that we want to spend, where you can allocate this. And it wasn't necessarily done in a strategic kind of way. I never felt like there was enough conversation around what are we trying to accomplish with this number. If you're planning to go to trade shows, for example, or you're going to do some advertising, or you're going to do, whatever, that was the expectation, that you would, divvy it up into some different tactical areas, and you were off and running for the year.
Is it fair to say that back then marketing was viewed as an expense?
I would say that, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that you and I have seen much more of is the idea that the industrials especially are beginning to look at it the way they look at everything, which is what's the ROI?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so speak to that, your own experience with that, and what that means for us.
Sure. From my perspective, one of the most attractive things about inbound marketing was being able to provide more data around that ROI. So I saw a need a long time ago to be able to prove that our efforts were valuable to the company, whatever company it was that I was working for at the time. How do I make sure that they understand what we're doing is achieving the results we want it to? Once inbound marketing became a thing, one of the most attractive things about that was the attribution. You could finally say, this blog post, for example, led to this many conversions on this particular blog post. So you could be that granular, is to say, our efforts in creating this content led to this new contact, which turned into a lead, which, the sales team is working now. So there was that kind of direct line, if you will, to finally be able to prove the value of marketing beyond, in a more direct way. That still exists. You can now take a print ad, place a print ad, and you can get the same kind of attribution from the trade or the trade association or organization that's doing it. Even for things like trade shows, you can take your lead list and compare it to, add it to your HubSpot portal, for example, and then you can mark their source as a trade show, so that they came from a trade show, but then you can track what they do from there. Did they engage with the follow-up emails that you sent? Have they engaged in a conversation with your sales team? And really work it backwards again, to show that, okay, we were present at this trade show, it resulted in this many leads, and here's what these leads are doing now because of how, you're tracking things differently than you were 20 years ago.
Yeah. And because you identified those as targets, it's much easier to identify them as interested, even though they're not converting, and we can monitor the behavior, which scares a lot of people, of course.
Yes.
that we have better behavior observation tools than we ever had. And attribution has gotten huge. It's an industry. But also more discrete behavior monitoring that we're seeing, which allows us to make a judgment on this is working as we intended, it's working better than we intended, or this isn't working at all. And we can make those calls so much faster than we could have even 5 years ago. So speak to what that does to managing the budget from our perspective.
It allows for more flexibility. It allows us to be really agile as we approach, like if the year-long spend or we decide at the beginning of a quarter, for example, we're going to test this out and see how it works. A lot of times we can know by the end of the quarter if it's worth our while to continue or if it's such a failure from the get-go that we want to abandon it, which gives us more flexibility and also, gives us a better opportunity to make sure that we're using the resources appropriately. So as we experiment with different tactics.
And I would guess that that would probably extend to when we're marketing to current customers, that if we have good data unification, so we have the view of everything within the CRM, and in our case within HubSpot, we can do targeting of our customers and have everything about them, all the knowledge of the business that they've done and what we're targeting them for, one source of truth. That feels like a great leap forward in terms of managing from your seat.
Right. So it allows us to be very segmented in our approach to how we're working with or how we're approaching current customers. So if we know current customer has owns a piece of equipment, for example, and we know that there is an upgrade to that piece of equipment that could really help them from an efficiency standpoint, we can be very direct in our messaging to them, very specific. If we are able to identify who those customers are, those current customers are, we can speak directly to their pain points, which gives us a better opportunity to sell that upgrade to them. And you can do that across the board. There's so many different ways you can slice and dice the data. The more effective nurturing programs are those that are very specific and relevant to just a small segment, as opposed to what we used to call an email blast. You might be able to put that in the awareness bucket, but it's much more effective to really speak directly to a smaller audience.
So going back to the idea of segmenting, when we say data unification, we're talking about an ERP integrated with a CRM, so that you've got all of their purchase behavior attached to conversations and content and everything from a marketing perspective, and which feels like a whole nother conversation about managing the budget today, which is managing it and thinking in terms of our ability to target. So attribution is one thing,
right?
But what do you do with that in terms of targeting? And then you've got even a real exciting in the weeds ability to see what's happening from a segmented point of view. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what we've been talking about is the agility that we have with the capabilities that today's marketers have. Let's go back to building the first plan, though, which as a marketing firm, we find ourselves in the position of doing that pretty frequently when we're onboarding a new client. One of the first things to do is build them a playbook for the next 12 months. Talk to the importance of getting in the weeds of their goals as a business.
It's really difficult to put together an effective marketing plan or a marketing plan that has the greatest chance of success when you don't have a full understanding of what the business goals and objectives are. So if you're just putting your plan together kind of in a silo and you haven't been allowed to ask those questions, the effectiveness of your plan is going to be diminished. You might think, oh, we accomplished all these things and we did great. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't line up with what the company was trying to accomplish overall, then how much does it matter? So it's really important for the marketing team to be able to be a part of the conversations around what is the business trying to accomplish in this year. And that could go deeper than, well, we want to grow by 10% or whatever that number is. Like, okay, you want to grow by 10%, but what does that really mean? Like, do you want to grow by 10% with existing customers? Is that 10% growth in new business? Is it 10% growth in a specific service or product line? Have we looked at our current customers and do we know how much revenue we're expecting from each one of them in this year? And if that's not where we think it needs to be, then, what do we need to do to make it grow? You could just go on for hours, I think, digging in and asking questions to better understand where, the organization believes the greatest potential is, or what they mean by 10% growth. Because it can mean a lot of different things.
You got to decide what your focus is going to be, because you can't do everything. Mm-hmm. It gets to the quality of your earnings from your growth. And that's something that I don't know for industrial marketing that it's been thought of. I know on the consumer packaged goods side, they've been doing that for years, talking about the mix and how that affects their earning quality. But industrial, I don't know that they've actually considered having the ability to fine tune. What do you do then if you have a better understanding of current customer upsell versus acquisition customers versus new customers? So how does that impact the plan you recommend then?
I don't remember what the percent is, but everybody talks about it. Like, it's much easier to sell to an existing customer than it is to acquire a new customer.
And more profitable.
And more profitable. Yeah. So if you're looking at your marketing budget holistically, what I would do is I would identify, like, okay, what percent growth is going to come from current customers versus new customers versus upsells or whatever. You talked about integrating a new company, all of those kind of things. Typically, current customers represent the lowest hanging fruit. So if I'm looking at spending a percent of my overall budget, I will look at investing more there and maybe investing less in new clients or something that seems less likely and more, maybe not as profitable. Like, I'm not going to ignore it, but I'm going to allocate it appropriately so that I'm putting my efforts, my resources where I think I can have the most impact. Probably many more question trees to go down with an individual business to identify that, but that's how I would start.
Going back to this idea of unified data, almost everybody's got a 20-80 rule. The 20% who do 80% of your volume are usually the best upsells because they're loyal. They love what you're doing, and it's easiest to get them incrementally to say, oh yeah, that's an interesting service that we haven't acted on. I'm glad you brought it back to us. The other thing, I think, our own experience as we started to dig into segmentation of our CRM is recognizing that everybody's got customers or clients who have at one time been bigger than they are today. You could start to categorize those that, in some cases they got acquired by somebody bigger. Okay, so you've lost some of their business because of that. You've got lost customers who used to be big and now aren't doing anything. And you can segment those. You look at what you can do just with your own data. And I think one of our epiphanies in the last year is that most of our client base, when we start asking the questions, aren't doing enough. Planting some ideas, some possibilities, opens their eyes to, oh yeah, if we could learn that, if we could identify those possibilities, we would allocate our budget differently. And in some cases, they might even come up with more budget. They have to be convinced, and that's where the ROI comes in, and that's where it's tough to say no when you frame it in the way of a high probability opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Right. I would agree that that a lot of people in our or a lot of organizations in our ICP are not spending as much as they should to see the return that they want from their marketing investment. But it is much easier to get them to make that investment when you can demonstrate success with a smaller, either a smaller budget or taking a, kind of a mini targeted approach and demonstrating that like we can replicate this, like in the different segments that you were talking about. There's more opportunities for us to do this and be able to show results.
what are some of the questions that you like to ask that you see them responding to and maybe being more open to a spending increase?
I would ask them questions around things like reassessing like who their ICP is and saying, okay, like, wouldn't you like to have 5 more of those? Like, let's talk about who is our best customer right now. And if we could replicate them, wouldn't we want to do that? Because, they're profitable, they're easy to work with, whatever the attributes are of that customer, we would want more of that. So instead of asking, like, we need more budget to do XYZ thing, I would frame it more as what could we do as an organization if we had 5 more customers like this? And then start making suggestions around, here are things we could do to try to capture or grow, our ideal customer. And here's, how much budget that would take. So instead of framing it as, well, we can't accomplish whatever, we can't accomplish 10% growth with the budget you've given us, frame it as, but what could we do if we had 5 more of the customer A who we love and brings us great success? What could we do as an organization if we had that? So why wouldn't we invest in trying to get to 5 more of those?
I've had fun asking, even boiling down the question further and just saying, what would one new customer be worth if they replicate your ideal? Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that'd be worth, X to the bottom line. Wouldn't that easily fund an additional $75,000 in your marketing budget? And they have to answer, well, yeah, that's a no-brainer if that can happen. And then the other thing that I think we've all seen is if we talk about aggressive marketing influencing the time to revenue. How fast are you to either an upsell or a new customer that actually starts generating revenue for you, and making the argument, and this is supported by research, that a good focused marketing effort accelerates the buyer journey. What they see, how fast they learn about your solutions and your point of difference, your relevant advantages versus their current vendors. It accelerates an interested party. They move down the funnel faster. And so the time element, everybody understands that in the C-suite.
Right.
They're all measuring their free cash flow. They're talking about orders to revenue, and we're part of that. It can become a RevOps conversation. So budget influenced by RevOps, which is a wonderful thing for us, that we can talk end to end on the different impact we can have. Talk to us about when you think about marketing assets and auditing them. What's your approach on that? How would you start that process with a client?
Well, there's different kinds of assets. So you have, your web assets, what lives on your site right now. Blog posts are considered an asset, for example. All of your resources, so any kind of advanced content you've created. And when we say advanced content, we mean ebooks, white papers, any kind of tools or, questionnaires, anything that you've put together to help educate people or move them further down their journey. We also have video assets. You have email assets, anything that you've created that's with the intent of either marketing to or selling to existing customers or new customers can be considered a marketing asset. So we would ask a customer to help us identify and find all of those. Like if they're using HubSpot, it's pretty easy for us to be able to export information into a spreadsheet to be able to parse it up differently. So how we would use that then, once we've identified things, if we were doing a website specifically, for example, we might look at landing pages and blog posts and then look at some key metrics related to those assets and see which ones are performing, which ones aren't. Where is there an opportunity to improve some of them so that they do perform better? And are there some that should be eliminated? And then once we've kind of parsed through everything and identified those that either are performing well, could, have potential to perform better, and then are just not, hitting the mark. From there, we would go on and identify where can we use them. So if we've isolated or we've decided that we're going to market to a specific segment within the current customer base, we'll identify what do we have that already exists that we can use to campaign with those specific customers, and then decide how we want to deploy them. Like, do we deploy them just in email? Do we do some paid ads? Do we create sequences for our sales team to use that draws on these assets, some of these assets that we've created as well, and try to minimize the investment, if you will? Like, there probably will be some new things that we need to create, but also taking advantage of the unified data first, and then taking advantage of the assets that already exist, and then identifying what might need to be created to complement what we have in place, and then building a campaign from there.
And meanwhile, we're doing this in a world that's changing pretty fast. Mm-hmm. And so speak to the impact that industry trends or emerging technologies might have on how we look at opportunities and gaps.
Sure. So I have actually been doing this quite a bit myself, using AI tools, a ChatGPT or Claude, and providing the tool with information that I have, and then prompting it to kind of help me identify where are the holes and, what looks good, or what are the common themes, or, whatever. It can even take a spreadsheet. And if you have a spreadsheet of assets, for example, and it has all the metrics included in it, it can help you sort. It can help you with keywords too. So if you know that you rank for 200 keywords in the top 10, but you have a sense, for example, that some of them are not attracting the traffic that you want them to, like, you can feed that kind of information into an AI tool and just ask it questions until you get to the end result that you're looking for. So I've found just recently, even this week, that I could save a lot of time by using a tool like that to help us. Like you said, we want to get, time is of the essence, and everybody understands time. And so if we can identify ways to more quickly deploy the assets and create the assets and get things in front of people, we should take advantage of that as much as we can, and it will position us better than those who are not using tools like that.
The themes that keep coming up, and I think if we were summarizing the conversation so far, we started with attribution, micro-targeting, absolutely, using unified data to guide us, and then really mapping, looking at ourselves, looking internally at what we have and where we are, and then accounting for what's changing in the world that we're competing in. The pressure it puts on modern marketers is that there's no set it and forget it. There's a constant monitoring, and I think that points to the idea that AI gives us an ability to get our arms around what could be staggering in the possibilities that we have to sift through for the insights that drive recommendations that we'll present tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Right. Literally.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Crazy.
Sure.
Crazy. We could talk all day, but
we could.
Stacy, thanks for being a guest on The Changeover.
Sure.
This has been a wonderful conversation. I can't wait to see the reaction we get from our audience, because I think they're going to enjoy this.
Good, I hope so.
Thanks a lot.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Changeover podcast. Remember to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Wider.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. Let us know what you'd like to hear about next time by messaging Wider Group on social media. Thanks for watching.